Good morning. How's everyone doing so far? Good. Yeah? You awake? Yeah. Have our caffeine? Ready for tonight's party? Yeah. Right, okay. Well, hopefully some of you guys remember me. It's been a while. I mean, I come to Astrocon every year for like the last 7 years, and I used to run the Trixbox CE project, and then I was over at 888 VoIP, and I found a new home this year over at Vitality, and couldn't really be happier. And I'm really excited about a lot of things that are happening in the SIP trunking world, and want to kind of go over some of the problems that we have in SIP trunks and where I see it going over the next couple years, and things that can be improved and things to look for in the marketplace as you're trying to migrate people from the PSTN over to SIP. So hopefully you'll find some of this informative, and if not, well, you got what you paid for coming over here, right? So some of the advantages of SIP, I mean, most of us already know this, right? I mean, we have lower cost, easier configurations, robust feature sets nowadays, caller ID, CNAME, E911, all that kind of stuff that's been going on for a while. There hasn't been a lot of changes in the SIP trunking world for a while. It's one of the more boring aspects of the business for the last few years. That and probably telephones. When you go, wow, it's got a color screen. Yeah, exactly, right? It's hard to get excited when we all have color screens in our hand. In the market, you haven't seen much in the way of innovation. I mean, there's just, what can you do on a SIP trunk, right? It's dial tone. Wow, right? Wake up every morning going, wow, I can make and receive phone calls. We have seen minor improvements over the last couple years, things like E911 coming out, really bad T38 implementations. I mean, there's no standardization there whatsoever. I mean, it's hit or miss whether T38 is going to work or not, and reception rates are really not up to par with where things should be. So we're looking at where can some of that stuff be improved. And I'll talk about some of the improvements that have happened and that we see coming down the pipeline here over the next couple years. Some of the things that we need to improve as a SIP trunk industry is better T38 standardization. I mean, it's really not a full standard. I mean, it's an RFC, right? I mean, everyone can implement it a little bit differently, and they do, which means it doesn't work very well. Video support. We're getting a lot of requests for video support, and it's just difficult to do when you have termination going across PSTN somewhere in the middle and translation between different providers, and unless you're all on the same net, it's really not quite there yet, which is why companies like Aver Video Conferencing is doing really well, because it's really not too many ways to do video successfully today. Standardized fax support over G711, that's been picking up again, surprisingly enough. I mean, how many people just love fax? Oh, one, all right. I mean, it's a necessary evil, right? I mean, any contracts have to go over fax. I mean, you can't buy a car with it going over a fax. You can't get a house without doing faxing, because it's really only electronic media, if you will, that's acceptable in court. You can't take PDF documents in most court places, and so faxing is going to be with us for a long time, and I don't see that going away. It's trying to figure out how we can adopt it and put technologies on top of it to solve some of those problems. I think Cisco's done a really good job with their new SPA 112 and 122 ATAs. We've had extremely good success with those products in just connecting to the fax machine and going over our SIP trunks, or even through different PBXs as extensions. I mean, I've done that with Asterisk, I've used it with 3CX, and it's been working really, really well. And Cisco's trying very hard to make those two ATAs fax ATAs. We see those from a couple other companies as well. There's also other technologies out there for handling fax. I'll talk about those in just a minute, but for the time being, we kind of still need to stick with G711. I mean, it's the standard out there, and that's what 99% of the fax machines are support it, if not a much higher number than that, actually. So what is a VoIP provider Generation 2 going to look like? And we're starting to see some of that with different providers that are out there. You'll see, not so much at this show, I'm kind of surprised that there aren't more SIP trunk providers here today, but you're going to start seeing SMS-enabled DIDs. That's going to be one of the big things over the next couple years. PBX hosting, why not, right? We have voice optimized networks. We have data centers. All of the guys are starting to do this now. Put the PBX in the cloud, whether it's asterisk-based or free switch or whatever it is. The SIP trunk providers are starting to offer IP PBX hosting. Gives you a centralized place to manage stuff. It's in a big data center. You got redundant power. You got all the networking. You got big pipes coming in. It's in the same office as the SIP trunk provider, so you don't have latency there. You're only dealing with the phones. For small businesses, this can be a really good opportunity to offer some of these services. We're starting to see more and more SIP trunk providers offer more robust solutions for the smaller businesses or how many of you are resellers? Let's go there. How many of you are resellers? Okay, so for you guys, trying to find solutions for your customers where you can just sell individual extensions without having to work with a big BroadVox system or something else, that's what we're starting to see more and more of from a lot of different SIP providers that are in the market today. API support, the bigger resellers want API support for adding and deleting extensions, for managing users, for ordering DIDs. So I think we're going to see a lot more traction with different companies supporting APIs so that you can automate a lot of those processes. SMS-enabled DID. So I do want to touch on this because I think this is one of the bigger things that's going to happen over the next couple years. What do I mean by this, right? It means I can send and receive text messages to my DID. Initially, you go, well, so what? I can do that from my cell phone, right? But as we have more mobile workers that are out there, we have a big problem with business continuity. You have a salesperson sat on the field, they're using their cell phone all the time. Now that the customer that they're dealing with has that salesperson's cell phone number. That salesperson leaves the company and they just took all their contacts with them. Today, we can easily put a soft client on our smartphones, right? We can put soft phones on here. So now we can push their DID and their extension to their smartphone using basically a jobber client on any Android or iOS device. We can now connect to a back-end jobber server. This is how we implement it anyway. Other companies are going to do it differently. But now I can send and receive text messages from that same DID. So that salesperson leaves the company, and now I can just reroute all those text messages and those phone calls to another employee. So as a company, I maintain that business continuity with those clients instead of that salesperson walking out and having all that stuff on their cell phone. Does that make sense? I think this is going to be one of the biggies in how we can start melding some of these technologies together and maintaining control of our customers when we have salespeople that are out there that come and go. Short code messaging. Anyone familiar with short code messaging? You've seen it. Text this message to some phone number and get a response. I mean, I'm sure all of you guys are American Idol fans and you all use that for voting, right? Yes, okay, good. Same thing, right? Well, we've implemented that with a very simple web portal to create those keywords and associated messages, as well as being able to do back-end programming. We can send it to a post to a URL, and you can grab those phone numbers and then store that, and then do direct marketing to those companies. So as an example of how we are doing that, grab your phone and do that right now. So if you do this, if you text Astracon to 99629, what you're going to get back is a little message that's going to give you all a free account with Vitality with $10 credit and some special Astracon discounts. So a way of marketing to your customers. Again, all the SIP providers are going to start providing this service because the DIDs are becoming SMS enabled, and it's going to enable everybody to do stuff like this. So getting involved with these types of technologies today is going to give you something else that you can offer your customers. Or if you're the IT director in your company, things that you can use like this to help market your products or services. So great way of getting more attached to those customers by being able to capture their cell phone number and then directly market to them later on. Mobile device support. I mean, if we're not supporting mobile devices today, I mean, we've probably got problems. I mean, that's certainly one of the most explosive markets that we have is supporting mobile devices. Not just from a soft client point of view, but the SMS things, the APIs, portals that we can manage all of our account information with on our mobile devices. So certainly mobile device support is going to be more and more important down the road. How many of you have some form of tablet? Okay, yeah. I mean, almost everybody in here. I mean, we're all kind of geeky that way, right? So if we don't have tablets, I mean, we're the innovators, we're the early adopters. So having support for those types of devices to manage your accounts is very important because it's very non-standard out there with Java and JavaScript and everything else that doesn't quite work right. So creating really good support for mobile devices is certainly coming. We do it, a couple other companies are starting to do that now. So things to look for when you're looking for a SIP trunk provider. Voicemail transcription. This is really becoming a hot ticket item right now. And I'm actually surprised how long it took for adoption of this. A lot of people didn't really get it at first. Kind of like the SMS-enabled DIDs. They didn't really quite grasp why voicemail transcription is important. Google Voice did it. Probably a lot of you played around with that and tried it out. But being able to actually have this on your DID and get those messages, once you start using voicemail transcription, it's really difficult to go back. I mean, I find I have to actually listen to the voicemail maybe 1 out of 100 times. So I can be in a room like this, see the message, and just read it and go, well, I need to respond to this, I need to get up and leave, I need to take care of this, or not have to worry about it, but you don't have to be picking up your phone and listening to voicemails to know whether you need to respond. So I feel that voicemail transcription today is something that's really helping make us more productive by allowing us to deal with things on our own time and be able to work with that and decide how we need to react without having to listen to it. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. It's probably 80–85% perfect these days, you know, somewhere in that neighborhood. But the only time I really see it completely munge a word is if it's some company name that's not a word. And like the guys from 3CX call me, and it just kind of, I can figure it out because it'll go THREE, and it'll spell it out. But I get the gist of it. I know I can figure out who was calling me. So voicemail transcription, certainly another hot technology to be looking at and showing your customers or your internal people and trying to help them with their productivity. Things that we really need to focus on in the next couple years, I think, are going to be the hosted conference calls. Again, that's something that's starting to pick up. We're seeing a lot more traction in hosted conference calls today. More things around that business continuity. I mentioned the SMS DIDs as one, transcription as another, and the cloud PBX offerings as a third one. These are the 3 most growing segments of our industry today. So as you're, again, looking for different providers, look for the things that they're doing, how innovative they are in offering these types of services. Today, we don't offer hosted conference calls. It's not something we do. So if that's what you need, it's unfortunately not us, you know, but there's other solutions out there. We have our booth over here with their drag bike. Come by and win an Xbox 360 over there. Test your reaction time. It's kind of fun, you know, over there. Now, what are the issues that you guys are having with SIP trunks today? You still having problems with QoS? That seems to have been an issue that's starting to go away as we're seeing QoS being built in to even the smallest routers. I mean, $40, $50 routers are starting to have good QoS functionality built into them. The networks are getting better. Our bandwidth is getting better. We're starting to see far less problems in that area. And those of you who have known me for a few years, you would never have seen me up here promoting SIP trunks. I was the biggest person to say, the PSTN is going to be with us for another 15, 20 years, and here I am working for a SIP trunk provider. That's probably the biggest irony that I can think of. But I've been using nothing but SIP trunks for 7 years now, and I've seen it progress over the years. It's got better and better. It's got more stable. It's been more reliable. The providers aren't going down like they used to. That used to be the biggest problem, is just service continuity problems. I mean, but then again, this past month, we've seen call-centric go down for 2 weeks, flow route go down for days, iCall go down for days. So those are still big problems out there.
The biggest problem we see with SIP trunking is, and we don't typically use it primarily, we use it for DR, right? And the biggest problem with DR and SIP trunking in traditional methods is getting those inbound numbers to roll over to SIP trunks. I think carriers are starting to do a better job of pairing their traditional services with SIP trunking, but in instances where you're using carrier A for the traditional service and carrier B for the redundant service, there's a real challenge on the inbound side.
I've seen a lot of that in the past, where one carrier just did not want to roll over numbers to another carrier. And that, to me, instantly raises red flags. And probably in the last 12 to 18 months, I've seen a huge shift in that, and they're becoming less concerned about those things. Same with number porting. Number porting has got better and better over the last couple of years, even though they're still really bad carriers when it comes to releasing their numbers. Some companies charge a lot of money for porting numbers.
DTMF issues. We deliver a lot of calls. We're exclusively SIP, and occasionally we have our IVR application, so it requires people to have touchdown capability. So we find when somebody's using Comcast cable VoIP service in their house, there's some issue between the translation of the DTMF, and we have to route the call differently to them through other carriers. We use level 3 in Quest, SIP trunking to get the call another way, hopefully make it work. And then you open up cases and trouble tickets, and then the problem magically goes away, but they say they couldn't find anything. So those are the kinds of issues that we've had with SIP trunking.
DTMF probably is still one of the bigger issues that I see, especially when you have two trunks. When you're using two different providers, you get it working perfectly with one, and you got problems with the other. And everyone blames each other. And I don't know that that's going to be solved anytime soon, because everybody does things a little bit differently. And if we were all using the exact same platforms across the board, well...
But you asked for the issues with SIP trunks.
Yeah, it is certainly a big one. And like I said, it's a bigger problem when you have multiple providers. If you're using a SIP trunk as a backup, well, you only have to fix the problem once. If you have multiple that are rolling over, you're going to certainly could run into big problems there.
I'm from the alarm industry. So what we run into now is the millions of panels that are out in everybody's homes, commercial facilities, banks. Here, if you look out front here, Ackerman Security monitors this building. They're a client of ours, and they run our software for the monitoring. And what we find that happens is, as soon as somebody switches a SIP line at their house for a cable modem or something, or a carrier reprovisions something to SIP or any kind of smart tees, all the communication in those panels goes completely away. And we have major issues because it changes the frequency slightly. Now, under the 711 Kodak, if there's not a lot of latency, it will work.
Right.
And a lot of these panels do use DTMF, as we talked about in the past. So I know you might not be the best person to answer this, but to work off these millions of devices, the fax machines, the DTMF
POS
devices,
systems.
Yeah, exactly. What are we looking at? Because it's really killing our industry. And maybe I drop in a standard TDM prime into my center or a client center, come to find out that at midnight the CO switches it off to SIP lines going to another state. So now my global call centers, all of a sudden they'll lose half the country for 6 hours, and they get garbage signals. So
In the primary time that you need to be monitoring them.
yeah, during the night when you have a lot of fires and burglaries going on and things. And so it's becoming a major problem. And so what modifications, if any, do you know in the SIP world that would help alleviate some of these issues on these legacy hardware platforms that are realistically going to be around for the next 10, 15 years until we rotate them out?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. POS, credit card systems, alarm systems, anything that's using dial tone, DTMF, or a modem on it for the signaling, we're still seeing big problems with that. I think part of that is being solved with some of the new ATAs. If you put in a kind of a fax-specific ATA like the Cisco SPA112, you'll find that that will work in a large percentage of those cases. And if it's not working, you tell Cisco. They are working extremely hard to make those as robust as possible. The SPA112, that's a single port, and the SPA122 is the dual port. So we're seeing those being used in those POS systems, credit card systems, alarm systems, fairly successfully. And if you have a problem, they've got a form on the site where you can submit. I think you can pull a log file off the device and send it to them. And they're extremely good about putting out patches to fix compatibility issues like that. So that's probably the best one that I have seen today in solving that particular problem. Again, it's not ever going to go completely away until those devices are converted to IP, which
And that's happened a lot. It's just how many millions of homes are in the country here that a service tech's got to go out physically replace it.
yeah.
So it's going to take
And it's getting worse because the cable companies are doing SIP, and it's making the problem progressively worse, or almost exponentially worse over time. Absolutely. I'll let him figure out who to call on.
Just general question with SIP, just overall reliability. I mean, worst thing you want is, 7:30 in the morning, that customer calling you saying, Paul, my phones are out, I can't connect, I can't make calls to extra area code, I can't do this, I can't do, get an audio drop, they don't say audio dropouts, but the audio dropouts, it's right away, you put a service ticket in level 1, level 2. I want to go out there, I want to put a system in, I want to get paid and, not walk away from it, but I want my customers calling me for two things, to recommend me and buy something else, and just, I realize that, this is the new technology, and SIP is, obviously the way to go, but just, how do you see that,
Okay.
in the industry going forward, in all honesty?
How many of you guys started off as the IT guy or the computer guy? Yeah. And you get that customer that calls and he's like, hey, can you come by, and my computer reboots 4 times a day, and it's a little inconvenient. You're like, well, how long has it been going on? I'm like, I don't know, 3 months. First time they drop a call, they're screaming at you. The tolerance level for phone problems is completely different from IT problems. Now, probably the best thing to happen to us in a long time is cell phones. Why? They lowered the bar. Right? People are kind of more apt to ignore problems these days than they were a few years ago because they get echo on their cell phone, they get dropped calls on their cell phone. So I've seen the tolerance level go up, which is good and bad. I mean, it's good because they call us less, but it's bad because we want to improve quality all the time. So it's kind of a mixed bag there. I think, though, that the networks have improved so much over the last couple years. SIP trunk providers aren't just throwing in a T1 or 2 and hoping for the best. I mean, they're getting big fiber drops right to their buildings. They're being smart about co-locating in the huge facilities like May West and May East and Miami. And they're getting smarter about how to build their networks. So I've certainly seen the reliability factor skyrocket over the last 2 years as the bigger SIP trunk providers have really started to figure out the right way to build their networks. So definitely a big shift that I've seen in the last couple years.
Hi. How important do you think HD voice and encryption of SIP trunks is going to be?
Yeah, not.
Why not?
Just compatibility issues. I mean, the problem is you're going from one SIP trunk provider. Often that's going to hit the PSTN somewhere and then go back to another SIP provider somewhere else. That middle ground is where everything falls apart. And that's why we don't have video today. I mean, it's not going to go all the way across. Even if you're going right from one SIP trunk provider to another, there's still a middle ground somewhere that's losing it. And unless you have that codec stream all the way through, it's just not going to be there. And I don't know where I don't know, not exactly sure where we're going to see the tipping point for that. I think some of that is like companies like us, where we're starting to peer with other SIP trunk providers. We've been doing that for years. So we have peering with, I mean, the list is huge. I mean, but everyone that wants to partner with us, we will peer directly to so that we can try and solve some of those problems and take that PSTN out of the middle ground. And I think that's where you're going to start seeing improvements there as, again, we're co-locating in the big facilities. The other companies are co-locating there, and we're like, yeah, let's just pop a cable over and start interacting more and taking the whole middle ground out of that picture. Plus, that's going to bring costs down. How many of you texted Astracon to 99629? Okay, good.
Most of us don't have cell phone service at this moment.
Good point. Good point. Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you go and try to provide a service, a telecom service, for a client that already has another another VoIP provider, and then your parameters are a little different than his parameters, and it ends up on the client's head, and you can't really overcome or become the primary vendor or provider for this client. What's your solution? How do you overcome the second provider?
You know, that's kind of what I spoke to a little earlier, even just with the DTMF being one of those types of problems where you get it all dialed in for one provider, you go to throw another one into the mix, and now half the calls DTMF doesn't work. And that's a problem I don't know who's going to be responsible for solving. Same kind of along with your question is you have two completely different providers, maybe one's a backup or one has better international rates or something, and trying to get everything working properly with both because there just isn't a good, solid baseline standard that everybody works across. So I think you're actually going to see that continue to be a problem over the next couple of years. You know, maybe if all of a sudden something else comes out that allows everybody to run the same platform easily, I'm not seeing that being solved. I mean, there's companies that are running Asterisk as the back end, and you know how many versions and different issues with I know providers that are still on Asterisk 1.2 up to current versions, companies running FreeSwitch, companies running all kinds of different products out there. And so as soon as that happens, you start having weird compatibility issues and differences between the different SIP trunk providers. I'm not sure that that's a problem that's going to be solved anytime soon.
Earlier in the presentation, you said that there was something for fax that's going to replace T38. Could you
Well, I'm not sure if things are going to replace T38, but one of the more interesting options that I've seen lately is with FaxBack. Now, FaxBack uses an audio codes HTTPS ATA. And there's a few SIP trunk providers out there, I mean, us being one of them, that has a specific fax service. Ours we call VFax, that can work over HTTPS. So you connect the fax machine to this audio codes ATA, and then there's a little connector, piece of software, this connector, that then basically does the translation for whichever provider you're using, and then sends that over an HTTPS connection to the provider to send the fax out. That is exceptionally rock solid because it's not sending the data across, it's sending it more as a file across. So that is an extremely good solution. Along those same lines is another product called FaxBox, which is from Rockbox. And a couple different companies, 888 VoIP sells that. And it's more of it's actually a small asterisk box, and it does the exact same thing. You connect your fax machine to it converts it to a PDF, and then does a file transfer to the data center. Now, the advantages of using that over just trying to do a G711 connection is you end up with a web portal, so that, I mean, same with RV faxes, you can now see all the PDFs that you've ever sent and received. So you have that instant archive of all of that, plus on inbound you can do fax to email, and so you pick up all these other functionality when you use a service like that.
The far leg would still be G711.
Yes, yeah, and that's going out through a data center bank of fax cards, basically. So those types of solutions, I think, are probably the way to go, and going to be the most reliable today, because it's not trying to send those tones back and forth. It's doing it as a file transfer. So check out FaxBack and FaxBox. Anyone else? How are we doing on time?
We got another couple minutes.
Couple minutes? Okay. Who's next? Well, okay then. So thank you very much for coming by. Always appreciate it. Good to see a lot of you guys again. Come by the booth, say hi, check it out, ride the motorcycle, win an Xbox, you know, all that good stuff. You know, we're having fun. And I guess I'll see you guys all at the party tonight.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Jim.